Is it possible? If it doesn't seem possible, I'm not surprised. After all, how can you live as you want to live when there are so many people who won't let you? How can you spend your money as you please when the government takes so much of it in taxes? How can you do what you want to do when the government and society have prohibited many of the things you'd like to do? How could you live your own life when you have responsibilities to your family, your friends, your job? How could you possibly ignore the demands that others make upon you? I realize that the odds against a free life must seem pretty formidable right now. And yet, there are already individuals who live their lives as they choose. Some of them may have begun with greater problems than you face now. But in spite of their problems, they've found freedom without waiting for the world to be free. To be free in an unfree world isn't nearly as unrealistic as it might seem at first glance. After all, it's commonly assumed that there can be free nations in a world that contain enslaved nations. Why then can't there be free states within a nation that isn't free? Or free towns within an unfree state? Most important, why can't there be free individuals within unfree towns, states, or nations? Freedom is possible, and you can have it, if that's what you really want. I can't know which specific freedom you crave most. Freedom from social restrictions, family problems, high taxes, bad relationships, the treadmill, governmental repression. Whichever one of these is most important to you, we'll cover it and more. And I think you'll find that the principles to be stated will apply to any type of situation that may be restraining you. It's not likely that you'll ever gain your freedom by joining, marching, picketing, or complaining, because all those methods rely upon changing the attitudes of others. What I have in mind concerns the use of methods over which you have complete control. Why you are not free. Freedom is the opportunity to live your life as you want to live it, and that is possible even if others remain as they are. If you're not free now, it might be because you've been preoccupied with the people or institutions that you feel have restrained your freedom. I don't expect you to stop worrying about them merely because I suggest that you do. I do hope to show you, though, that those people and institutions are relatively powerless to stop you once you decide you will achieve your freedom. There are things you can do to be free, and if you turn your attention to those things, no one will stand in your way. But when you become preoccupied with those who are blocking you, you overlook the many alternatives you could use to bypass them. The freedom you seek is already available to you, but it has gone unnoticed. There probably are two basic reasons you haven't taken advantage of that freedom. One reason is that you're unaware of the many alternatives available to you. You don't have to go to jail to avoid exorbitant taxes, nor do you have to be a social leper if you refuse to knuckle under to social pressure. You don't have to give up love in order to avoid complicated, restrictive family problems, and you don't have to go without friends to avoid having your life at the disposal of others. But if you're unaware of additional alternatives, it's easy to see these matters as being either-or questions. Fortunately, there are additional alternatives, ways by which you can have what you want without bringing bad consequences upon yourself. The second reason you're not free is because you've probably accepted without challenge certain assumptions that restrict your freedom. Our culture is saturated with philosophical truths, quote unquote, that are commonly accepted and acted upon and are rarely challenged. I think of these truisms as traps. A typical example of a trap is, quote, "It would be selfish to be concerned with your own freedom. You must think of others." Or, "The kind of freedom you want is immoral." or the government is more powerful than you are, or you have to accept the will of the majority. There are probably hundreds of such traps, but I've reduced those I've seen to 14 basic types. It's very easy to get caught in a trap. The truisms are repeated so often they can be taken for granted, and that can lead to acting upon the suggestions implied in them, resulting in wasted time, fighting inappropriate battles, and attempting to do the impossible. Traps can lead you to accept restrictions upon your life that have nothing to do with you. You can unwittingly pay taxes you don't have to pay, abide by standards that are unsuited to you, put up with problems that aren't really yours. Traps are assumptions that are accepted without challenge. As long as they go unchallenged, they can keep you enslaved. That's why it's important that we challenge them in the following pages. I think you'll find that most of them have no more substance than the ancient cliches, such as the world is flat. If you're not free now, it's very likely that you've accepted some of these traps, and you probably haven't known of a number of alternatives that could get you out of your restrictions without the pain and effort you might have assumed would be necessary. As we look at these traps and alternatives, I hope you'll become aware of the unlimited number of avenues open to you. You possess a tremendous amount of control over your situation, control that's disregarded when you focus attention upon the people who seem to stand in your way. Your freedom. Most books dealing with freedom present an involved plan that depends upon the support of other people. These usually urge you to pass the book on to others, sell the idea to a great many people, and gain the support of the public in order to be free. This isn't that kind of book. If you were holding the only copy of it, and if no one else could read it or accept its conclusions, the ideas would still be useful to you. We'll be dealing only with your freedom. Whether the ideas would work for others is unimportant. What you have to decide is whether they can work for you. You won't have to convince anyone else of anything. Every idea in the book will depend solely upon your own action. I can assure you, I didn't achieve my freedom through long hours, articulate oratory, or mysterious powers of persuasion, and yet I am free. More than for any other reason, I'm free because I've chosen to live that way. I've concentrated upon the things I control and used that control to remove the restrictions and complications from my life. As a result, I'm now free to live my life as I want to live it. Despite all-time high taxes, I pay ridiculously few taxes. Despite my irregular lifestyle, I live my own life without interference from society. Every day, my life is mine to use as I see fit. My time isn't committed to the state, to society, to a treadmill, or to fruitless relationships with people with whom I have nothing in common. I have no fear that the phone will ring any moment to tell me of something I must do with my time. I haven't needed to hide my head in the sand to achieve this. I have valuable relationships, personal, professional, and romantic. I make far more money now than I did when I was restricted, and it takes far fewer hours to make it. I'm involved with people who add to my life, and I'm independent of those who would take from it. My life is of little importance to you, however, and this book is not an autobiography. The title was chosen to let you know that at least one person has accomplished the freedom you seek, and that it can be done without changing the nature of the world. The attention will be devoted to your freedom, but the principles and ideas presented will be those that brought freedom to me. In the process, it's important to recognize that you will make all the decisions yourself. I can't tell you how to live, nor can I tell you what you must do to be free. Instead, I can suggest dozens of opportunities from which you can choose, and I can point out the various traps that may be enslaving you now. You will then have to decide for yourself how you'll use these suggestions. If the final decisions aren't made by you, you could never act with the conviction and purpose necessary to achieve your objectives. You have to decide what you're going to do, and above all, you have to know why you're doing it. Otherwise, plans and hopes are meaningless, temporary resolutions to be shelved the first time anything happens to interfere. So please, don't gain the impression that I'm telling you how to live. You have to decide how you're going to live. There will be scores of suggestions made in this book, and you'll have to decide which ones you can attempt and act upon. If I write with passion and urgency in places, don't assume I'm demanding a specific course of action from you. The greatest urgency will be in encouraging you to make the decisions for yourself. And that concludes part 2 of this reading. Tune in next time when we actually start this sucker up.